The streets were silent under the pale light of the moon, carrying an air of unease that seemed to seep into every corner. A chilling breeze rustled the trees, as if the night itself was whispering a warning of what was to come. It was in this atmosphere of tension that the young woman found herself walking alone, her footsteps echoing softly on the cold pavement. The distant sound of a dog barking, followed by the muffled noise of laughter, made her tighten her grip on the bag slung over her shoulder. She was not used to being out at this hour, but circumstances had forced her into the solitude of the night. Her mind wandered to the events of the day, but each thought was clouded by the discomfort of her surroundings. Shadows seemed longer than usual, and every corner appeared to conceal an unseen danger. The weight of unease grew heavier when she noticed a group of figures leaning against a wall, their eyes following her every step. She instinctively lowered her gaze, hoping not to draw attention, yet their laughter grew louder, and the silence of the street felt more hostile than before. She wanted to quicken her pace, but doing so might reveal her fear, and fear was the one thing she could not afford to show. The men called out, their voices laced with mockery. She ignored them, clutching her bag tighter and forcing herself to keep moving. Their footsteps followed. What began as a teasing taunt soon turned into an intimidating pursuit. The sound of shoes striking the ground behind her sent a rush of adrenaline through her veins. She darted down an alley, her breath quickening, hoping the darkness would conceal her. But the echo of laughter grew closer, and she realized that escape was not so simple. Her heart pounded as panic clawed at her chest. She had no one to call, no one nearby to help. Just when the night seemed to close in on her, a deep commanding voice broke through the chaos. "Leave her alone." The sound carried an authority that immediately shifted the air. She turned her head to see a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a protective stance, stepping out from the shadows. His sudden presence froze the pursuers in place. For a moment, silence reclaimed the street, but it was the silence before a storm. One of the men sneered and stepped forward, challenging the newcomer. The man didn't flinch. His fists were clenched, his jaw firm, his eyes steady. He had the look of someone who had faced danger before and had no intention of backing down. The group hesitated. They had expected an easy target, but now the odds had shifted. The woman stood frozen, torn between fear and relief, as the confrontation unfolded. The leader of the group hurled a crude insult, but his voice lacked the confidence it once carried. The stranger advanced slowly, his movements deliberate, his presence radiating strength. When words failed to intimidate, one of the men lunged forward. A swift punch cut through the darkness, and the sound of impact reverberated against the walls of the alley. The attacker staggered backward, clutching his face. His companions exchanged uncertain glances, realizing the fight they sought might cost them more than they imagined. The scuffle erupted briefly, with fists flying and the clash of bodies filling the alley. The stranger fought with precision, each movement sharp and decisive. He was outnumbered, but his composure remained unshaken. The woman watched, fear and awe mingling in her chest. She wanted to scream, to flee, but something held her in place, perhaps the realization that this man had stepped into danger to protect her, a complete stranger. The men, realizing the strength of their opponent, began to retreat one by one, their bravado dissolving into fear. The last of them cursed under his breath before disappearing into the night, leaving only silence in their wake. Breathing heavily, the stranger turned to the woman. His expression softened, the harshness of battle fading into concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head, though her trembling hands betrayed the storm inside her. He extended a hand, steady and reassuring. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of safety for the first time that night. He guided her out of the alley, ensuring no one remained in pursuit. As they stepped into the open street, the weight of fear slowly lifted, though the memory of the encounter still lingered like a shadow. The woman managed to whisper a thank you, her voice breaking with emotion. He nodded, as if the gratitude was unnecessary. To him, stepping in had been instinct, not choice. Yet she couldn't stop the thought that without him, her night might have ended very differently. They walked together for a short while, the silence between them speaking louder than words. She observed him cautiously at his strong build, the firmness in his stride, and the quiet confidence he carried. He seemed like someone who had known hardship, someone who had learned to stand unshaken in the face of darkness. As they neared a more crowded street, she felt safer, though her nerves still tingled. She wanted to know who he was, why he had appeared at that moment, why he had chosen to protect her. But the words remained unspoken. Perhaps part of her feared that once she asked, the mystery would dissolve. The man glanced at her, then at the road ahead, as though making sure she would be all right from here. He paused under a streetlight, his features briefly illuminated, a sharp yet kind, strong yet human. "Be careful next time," he said quietly, his voice carrying both warning and care. Before she could respond, he turned and began to walk away, his figure slowly merging with the night. She stood still, her heart caught between relief and an unexpected sense of loss. She had been saved by a stranger whose name she did not know, whose story she could only imagine. The night that had begun in fear now left her with questions, gratitude, and a memory that would stay etched in her heart. She walked the rest of the way home with trembling steps, but her mind replayed the scene, the sound of his voice, the swiftness of his defense, the unwavering look in his eyes. When she finally reached her home, she shut the door behind her and leaned against it, the silence inside wrapping around her like a shield. The adrenaline slowly faded, leaving exhaustion in its place. She tried to calm her racing heart, but the face of the stranger kept returning to her thoughts. Who was he? Why had he risked himself for her? She sat by the window, staring at the empty street below, half expecting to see his silhouette once more. The night outside remained quiet, but within her, a storm of emotions refused to settle. It was the kind of night that changes something within a person. She knew she would never walk those streets the same way again, never hear laughter at night without remembering the fear it carried. Yet she also knew she had witnessed something rare, a moment of courage, of selflessness, that reminded her not all darkness is without light. The stranger had been that light, brief yet powerful, a reminder that even in the harshest moments, humanity could still prevail. The clock ticked past midnight as she closed her eyes, but sleep did not come easily. Every sound outside made her stir, every shadow brought unease. And yet, beneath the fear, there was a spark of something else, a hope. Hope that she was not as alone as she had felt, hope that kindness and bravery still existed in the world. She clung to the thought, for it was the only way to silence the haunting echoes of the night. That night marked the beginning of a story she did not yet understand. A story born in fear, shaped by courage, and destined to unfold in ways she could not imagine. The morning after the storm had passed, the ranch lay under a blanket of silence broken only by the soft calls of cattle in the distance. James rose early, his bones stiff from another restless night. The images of the woman's broken ribs, her trembling voice confessing the horror of her stolen womb, haunted his sleep. He tried to distract himself with Retinia hauling water, checking the barns, tightening the fence posts battered by the wind, but his thoughts kept circling back to her. Inside the cabin, Emily stirred beneath the warmth of a quilt. For the first time since she had been brought there, her eyes opened without fear of immediate danger. The pain in her chest was sharp, but the deeper wound was invisibly a hollowness that no bandage could cover. She listened to the steady creak of wood as James moved outside, realizing with a mixture of relief and confusion that this rancher, a stranger, had chosen to keep her safe when the world had cast her aside. James entered quietly with a basin of warm water and a loaf of bread he had baked before dawn. He set them down with care, his movements deliberate, as though afraid of startling her. "You need to eat," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of someone used to silence. Emily nodded faintly, her hand trembling as she reached for a piece. The taste of simple bread, warm and real, felt like the first anchor she had been given in months. Days passed, and a fragile rhythm settled between them. James tended to the ranch, while Emily rested and slowly regained strength. Though her ribs still ached, she insisted on helping where she could, have folding laundry, sweeping the cabin, or feeding the hens near the barn. Each small act gave her a sense of dignity she thought had been stripped away. James, noticing this, allowed her space to contribute, never questioning her need to reclaim control over her own life. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Emily sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The wide horizon stretched endlessly, painted in orange and gold. "It's beautiful here," she whispered. James, leaning against the wooden post, nodded but kept his eyes on her. He had long grown immune to the beauty of the land, seeing it more as a burden than a gift. But hearing her voice, a voice that had known pain and still found beauty, shifted something within him. Gradually, Emily began to speak of her past. The words came in fragments at first, hesitant and broken. She told him of the men who had taken her, of the violence and cruelty that left her not only scarred but robbed of the hope of bearing children. Her tears fell freely as she spoke, yet there was strength in her confession, as though naming her suffering loosened its hold on her. James listened without interruption, his jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. He knew anger well, but this was different. This was rage for someone else, for a woman whose pain echoed in the hollowness of her voice. The nights grew colder as autumn pressed into winter. James brought more firewood, ensuring the cabin stayed warm. On one such night, as the wind howled outside, Emily asked, "Why did you help me?" "You could have turned away, said it wasn't your fight." James stared into the flames before answering. "Because I know what it means to be left behind. I know what silence costs." His words were heavy, hinting at a past he rarely shared. Over time, he told her fragments of his own story. The loss of his wife years ago, the stillborn child they had prayed for, the loneliness that followed. The ranch had become both his refuge and his prison. He worked the land, not out of joy, but to survive another day. Hearing this, Emily felt a strange kinship with him, two lives marked by loss, two bodies carrying wounds the world couldn't see. As the first snow fell, their bond deepened. Emily, once a shadow of herself, began to laugh softly at James's gruff remarks or hum to herself while cooking. She stitched together small pieces of normalcy, each one a quiet act of defiance against the cruelty she had endured. James, in turn, found himself looking forward to those moments, realizing that her presence had filled the emptiness he had long accepted as permanent. But healing was never simple. Some nights, Emily woke screaming, her body drenched in sweat. James would rise without hesitation, sitting nearby until her breathing steadied. He never touched her without permission, never crossed the fragile boundary she had built, but his presence alone anchored her to safety. Other days, she struggled with guilt, believing she was a burden, that her broken body could never belong anywhere. James countered her doubts not with grand speeches but with simple consistency, placing food at her side, repairing her quilt, making sure she knew she was not alone. Word eventually reached the small town nearby that a woman was staying with a reclusive rancher. Whispers spread, some kind, some cruel. James ignored them, but Emily worried. "They'll judge me," she said one evening, her voice trembling. "They'll say I'm tainted." James's eyes softened, and he answered firmly, "Let them talk. The only truth that matters is the one you live." His unwavering stance gave her strength she didn't know she had. By the time spring thawed the earth, Emily had regained much of her health. Though her body carried scars and the weight of loss, her spirit had begun to blossom. She worked alongside James in the fields, her laughter echoing across the open land. The pain would never vanish entirely, but with each sunrise, she chose life again. James, watching her, realized the ranch no longer felt like a prison. With Emily there, it had become a place of hope. Their companionship, born of brokenness, had reshaped both their lives. One evening, under the wide sweep of stars, Emily whispered, "I thought I had nothing left. But you showed me I was wrong." James, his voice steady, replied, "You saved me as much as I saved you." In the end, the ranch was no longer just soil and fences, it was a sanctuary where two wounded souls found the courage to begin again.